Good morning. We've got two more hands today. Both of these hands have a limper in the pot, and then I raise pre-flop. So the first game is a 2 NL. I'm sorry, a 4 NL game, 6 max game, and I get King Queen right on the button. So second guy to act, hijack, limps, and it folds to me, and I raise. Now I have 120 hands on this player, and right now he limps, or his VPIP is 22% with a preflop raise of 2. So his limping range is going to be somewhat tight. Let's say, maybe 20% or so. But with his preflop raise of 2%, he's probably only raising kings plus ace king. It's probably it. So he's probably opening, or at least calling, a range that looks maybe like this. Let's take out some of these unsuited hands. So that's 19%. I've got some positional awareness. So he's played most of his hands, cut off button, small blinds 40%, big blinds. EP EP's 31%, and then MP's 5. That's 1 out of 21. Let's see, 5 out of 16. It's possible he just wasn't getting the hands, or he was facing some other raises in that spot. His only pre-flop raise came from the cutoff, where he's raised 2 out of 23 times. So I think he's going to be pretty tight. And 19% opening range. That's a good starting point. Maybe he has the 7.5 to give 19.5%. I raise, fold the background, and he calls. Is he going to call with this entire range? Maybe. We'll leave pocket twos in there. Let's get rid of some of these weaker hands. And we'll leave all the ace suiteds. Yeah, sometimes people play him. Sometimes they don't. I think maybe something like that is what he'll call. At this level, I'm going to assume that all the ace suiteds get called in this spot. All right, so against that range, my king queen off is at 46%. 46% equity. I flop top pair with a gut shot and backdoor flush draw, be the second nut flush draw, with 9.5 big blinds in the pot. Villain checks to me, and I bet. So I bet more than half pot. More of a sizable bet at this point. I have top pair. I've got a gut shot. I'm betting this size because I suspect that, well, his range hits a good piece of it, and I think he's going to be calling at least one time. So King Queen, he's calling. King Jack, he's going to call. Queen Jack, definitely he's calling. He's got the straight. Pocket Queens would call. Pocket Jacks would call. I think Ace Queen would call. Ace Jack would call at least once to go for that gut shot. I think your Jack 10's going to call. 10-9's definitely going to call. I think there's a lot of hands in here that are going to call, and they're going to call larger. I think if I bet pot, we're going to fold out some of those hands. For example, like the 9-8, I think they would fold at that point. Pocket eights might fold. So he checks to me, I bet, and he calls. Now at this point, when he calls, what is he calling with? So I'm gonna say he's got top pair at least. Um, Move that down. Um, he's got at least top pair type hands. Let's get this in here. King, 10, and then 9 of hearts. I think he's gonna top pair, over pair. Do I think anyone's gonna check raise? No, I think a check raise might come on the turn. Uh, Players tend to wait and see how that turn card falls before they invest a lot of money in, or at least that's been my experience with these players. We're gonna say he's gonna call with pocket pair below top pair. I think the middle pair he's gonna call. The weak pair, I'm not gonna put all of the weak pair in here. I think with the weak pair, we're going to take out the sevens, sixes, fives, fours, threes, and twos. Um, I think eights are gonna fold out because they need two cards to improve. 9-8, um, he could call just once because he has a 9. Um, so we'll leave those in there. He is somewhat loose, 22%. Um, Flush draws definitely call. Open end and straight draws definitely gonna call. We'll say our gut shot's gonna be calling at least. Backdoor, two-door backdoor flush draws. No, I'm not going to leave those in. So he's calling with 57% of hands, and of those that he calls with, you can see he's calling with a lot of draws, and that brings my equity of the hand up to 66%. So I'm doing pretty well at this point. Turn was a 3 of hearts. That shouldn't change anything. Shouldn't change equities. It's not going to change which hands are ahead. So he checks, no big surprise. I bet. Now at this point, I do suspect that trips and two pair would probably check raise at this point. Not always, but I suspect that they would check raise because they don't want to be drawn out on, especially a player that's only going to be raising, kings plus ace king. They're going to be cautious, and they're aware that these draws they're going to want to try to blow people out. Maybe that's the incorrect thinking, but right now he's checking with his entire range. I bet 15, another large size bet, because I do think the clubs are going to come along, and I think like a king jack's gonna call, and 10 jack, and queen 10. I think they're all gonna call along, but is that justified? So the flop flush he'll call, the turn flush he'll call, the open-ended straight draw with 8-7, he's still gonna call. The gut shot, there's a lot of gut shots here. Is he going to call with all of these? And I'm going to say no. I think ace queens are out. Ace jacks are out. And 7-6 are out. So all of these other hands have a pair plus some other combo draw. So a king with a queen, a king with the jacks, queens, jacks. So they have at least a pair with that gut shot. So I think that's what we're going to be selecting on. When you look at all of these draws and you include them in his range, I'm doing quite well. I said I think he would probably check raise the straights and sets and possibly two pair, but cumulatively, when you look at that, that is a total of like 13%, 12.6. So most of the cards that he's going to be calling with will be hands that I either tie or I outright beat. So middle pair, we're going to take out the ace 10. I don't think he's going to be calling middle pair without that some sort of draw. The weak pair, ace 9, ace 3, 9, 8. I don't think he's calling with those anymore. Ace high, only if there's a flush draw. So he's calling at 49.4%. That gives my equity of the hand at 75%. If we happen to include two pair plus, then our equity is still at 63%. So betting large, betting 15 into 22 is just building up a pot when I'm in a good spot. Now, what cards are going to be good for my hand? What cards are going to be bad for the hand? I'm looking at it as basically as anything 8 or lower is going to be good. A diamond, anything 8 or lower, diamond, and spade. And that's a lot of cards. I even think an ace could be okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. I would hate to see an ace here because of the ace flushes that are in his hand. And I am gonna, for the flushes, I'm gonna even leave in the non-nut flush draws. All right, so he calls. Jack of hearts comes, and I thought this is just a pretty bad hand because I see him with a Jack 10. I see him with a King Jack. Uh, Giving him two pairs, but that also gives me that straight. The heart, not so much, because again, the heart flush is going to be a small percent of his hand. So his heart flush is 19.6, but getting the straight now is almost a third of his hand. Now we're going to have to chop versus taking the pot down completely. So he checks. And the question is, would he bet any of these hands? And yeah, I do. I kind of think a flush is going to bet. I think a flush is going to bet because he's going to be afraid that I might check behind. A straight, on the other hand, I don't think it's going to bet. I think a straight's more than likely going to check because of the hearts that's out there, the heart draw. So I think a straight's checking, a set's going to check, two pairs going to check. Basically, all the flush draws are going to check, and then that leaves me a decision: do I bet or do I check behind and see the river, or check behind and see the showdown? The question is, if I bet, what hands are going to call? So if I bet, I think he's going to be calling with that range. So 63% of his hand, and of that, 51% is a straight. So 51% is straight. And straight, I don't think we have ace queen. So I think we could bet because he is going to call with sets and two pairs, more than likely. And then if we bet, the question is, what should we bet? Pot's 52.5 big blinds. Villain has 59. Is he going to be elastic in his call? So if I bet pot, is he only going to call with a straight, versus if I bet half pot, he might call with a set or two pair? It's a good question. I think I probably should have just gone ahead and bet half pot. Try to get a call from the sets and two pairs. I didn't. I just checked so we can see a showdown. And part of that is because I did put hearts in his range, and at the time I didn't consider that hearts was actually a pretty small percentage, that he likely had more pairs and two pairs. And as soon as I clicked the check, I thought, I should have bet, because I think trips and two pairs all call me at that point. So I check. We see a showdown. He has ace king. Now, I got lucky there. Uh, I got lucky there. Uh, so with the ace king, I don't have that in his range at all. I assumed he would have raised with that ace king. So that allows us now to kind of go back and say, well, let's change our hands, change our assumptions. Uh, let's put ace king back in his range and say that that preflop raise is only going to be kings plus. Now that he does this, okay, so now his pairs, he's going to have top pair in his range. We still bet with that. He still calls with that. Uh, Turn comes out. Uh, Still, we're actually, we don't have as high of equity. So he checks, we bet, he calls. We're going to still leave in all these middle pairs. And then on that river, when the Jack of Hearts comes, now we can think about what is he going to call? What is he going to call with? He has 13% in his top pair. Straights make up a smaller percent. I think it's even more important now to bet if we think he has ace king in his hand. Uh, I still like my flop bet. I still like my turn bet because we still have, if called, uh, we have good draws just with that jack. And you know, if we bet here, he may fold, a non-heart hand. Um, why he called flop and turn? He's got top pair. It's 4NL. They do this. So I should have recognized this a little bit better, um, so that he could have this ace king in his range. All right, so that's hand number one. Let's look at hand number two. All right, so hand number two is also a hand where we are facing limpers. So under the gun +1. In this case, this would be low jack position. Limps. Small blind. Limps. And then I'm in the big blind with king, queen of diamonds. So let's look at what hands are going to be limping. We've got 42-2 here. Pre-flop raise of one out of 43. 3-bet range is 1 out of 16. So it's a possibility that he wasn't getting big hands to raise. But he's still playing wide, somewhat wide. So let's give him something maybe like this. I still think we need a few more. Leave king 10. Maybe all kings. Yeah, he's played a lot of hands, a lot of hands. So I think we're gonna have to really increase the range. We'll do all aces, which seems strange. Let's see if I have any information on him. 3-bet range, jack 7 off. Called 2-bet from blinds. Called 3 bets out of position. Called any 4 bets with queen jack off. We got jack 8, jack 9. Limp and called. Okay, so we're going to leave all of these offsuit connectors in there. Maybe something like that, where he's got straight possibilities. That's 40%. That's a really wide range. I'm going to save that range. So I just copied it because we can take a look at it. So he also limps, and we'll come back to him. Now, when I bet and he calls, which he does, I still think it's going to be this entire range. We saw he limps and calls with Jack 8, Jack 9 offsuit. If he has those, especially Jack 8, he probably has all of these offsuits as well. So his limping range is probably a limp calling range. Maybe if he had some of these Queen Little suited, maybe he'd call those. But let's get back to Villain 5. So Villain 5, I have 261 hands on him. He is a very tight player. He has raised 3-bet, 1 out of 83 times. He's raised 6 out of 259. I've got a limp and call to raise with Jack and Ace Jack. I've got a called 2-bet from blinds range. Look at that. Jacks to kings, Ace King off, Ace Jack off. This guy is tight. So let us kind of see what we can put together for him. I'm going to take out aces. I'm going to assume he would have bet aces. But I'm going to leave kings because, again, he called 2 bets from blinds with kings. So I think he's going to be calling very, very tightly. That's 5%. That gets us up to 6%. We'll do Ace Jack. That's 8%. That's probably too wide. That's might be good. That still may be a little too wide. Maybe that Ace 10 for being out of position. It could be something like that. Yeah, we'll leave it there. So something really tight. And then when I raised it, he calls again. And I think he'll probably call everything, especially with one other caller, even the 8s and 9s. A person this tight will likely call these to set mine and then be done when he misses. So flop comes out 8-7-5. So 8 of spades, 7 of spades, 5 of hearts, which misses me completely. All right. My equity versus this tight range is 22%. That assumes he's going to play everything. So I bet. I'm not too thrilled with this bet. And I'm not too thrilled because we've got players that are tight. So I'm okay with making this bet versus this villain, this range, even though I'm way behind. The villain's so tight that I think he's just going to fold all of his offsuit overs and really only call with pocket pairs. So when you look at the total number of his over pairs versus total hands, you can see it's like 30%, 29% he has an over pair. He's got a set 3.6% of the time. I see that as him calling just with those. Yeah, he has a flush draw. So if we take out all those hands and say he is only calling with that overpair of sets and flush draws, you can see that it's 40%. I think this is a good shot to go for a continuation bet here to try to get him to fold out his equity. And if he calls, then you can kind of be confident that we're way behind at this point. Yeah, he's going to have flush draws in there, but most of the time he's going to have this overpair, and we're hoping for a king or a queen to hit. Villain 1, on the other hand, is super wide. If you remember, he had all of those hands in his range, and of all of those hands, he had a bunch of these middle cards, suited and offsuits that are going to hit this flop and hit, possible open-ended straight draw, with the six only. So I will say combo draw. He 8-6, 7-6, 5-6. He had 9-8, 9-8. He had 10-9. Suited and offsuited in his range. He had a Jack-9 hand, Jack-10. All those hands he's going to be calling, and they're probably also going to be calling a lot. Now, at the time, I thought, yeah, he's going to be calling, but my thought was any ace, king, queen, or jack is going to give me a potential second barrel that could then prompt a lone 8 to fold, or a lone 7 to fold, or a pocket 9s, pocket 10s, and so forth. It gives them the reason to fold with the overcards. So I at least had an idea that I had favorable hands that I could see bet, but upon review, I'm just not sure that that's gonna work so well. Now, why don't I go ahead and get his range up? Because he folds. So that was somewhat of a surprise. And if we looked at his fold to C bet, I think you can see why. So fold to C bet was 50%, 1 out of 2. I just kind of assumed, with this range, yeah, he's going to hit at least something on this board. But my guess is he didn't. Maybe he had, pocket 4s or pocket 3s or pocket 2s, something strange. Or maybe he just decided, his overcards, he's just going to fold, which he does. He does have a lot of overcards. So he folds, but this guy calls. So at this point, he calls, and I think he has set over pair flush draw. His fold to C bet, 2 out of 4. So not many people he hasn't really called pre-flop much, and hasn't been faced with a lot of C bets. And his turn to C bet is 0. So I mean, it's a tight player. I'm gonna think that this is his range. Set over pair flush draw, and continue with that. Yeah, it's possible he could have had, gut shot with Jack 10, maybe pocket 9s, and maybe we should leave that in there. Maybe we should leave the gut shot 9s and the 10 Jack, at least for one round. So let's do that. Let's leave them in. 3 of hearts. I think that's really good card. I think the gut shots now might fold. And the gut shots represent about, let's see here, 28%, 27.8%. He has still flush draw at about 20%. Doesn't have these middle pairs. I don't think he has the top pair. I still think he's got the over pair and set. And now he checks, and I bet half pot again, and he calls. So are there any hands in his range that I think he's going to lead? I don't think so. I think a tight player like this probably isn't going to be leading into a raiser. I think he's going to, he might potentially check raise if he has a hand, and really a straight, I think, is what he's going to check raise. Trips might not even check raise at this point. So I bet he calls. I still think he's calling with his overpair. I think he's calling with the set. Does he check raise with kings? I don't think so. I don't think he'll do that. So I still think flush draw. I think the turn flush draw gives him a reason to call one more time. And the gut shots, is he going to call the gut shots again? I don't think so. I think we're going to take the flush draws out. We're going to leave. We're going to take those gut shot draws out. We're going to leave in the flush draws. So with this, his continuance range, it's 15%. I bet, And again, question is, why am I betting? I'm just overly aggressive. I don't have any draws other than the 6 over cards. That's why we're reviewing this hand. I just don't really like the bets. But that king of spades saved me. Or did it? So pot now is 83.88 big blinds. Villain only has 13.52 big blinds. We should have kind of seen that on the turn, because with 34.48, I could have just pushed him in. That would have probably maximized any folds, but in reality, I don't think anyone's going to be folding. So I think looking at this, I should have just said, you know what, I should just check behind, see the river, see what happens. King of spades falls, which could be great. He did have the flush draws in his range, so those get there at 13%. He still has his sets. His overpair now isn't in the range, and I don't think he's got the top pair. So I don't think he was just calling with king, queen, king, jack. So question is, if I bet, what is he going to call with? A player list tied, I think he folds out the pocket pair below top pair. I don't think he calls those. I think he's probably calling with the set, and he's calling with the flush. So I think if I bet, I'm only getting called by worse, which means I just, I check behind, take the showdown, hope he had a pocket pair. And that's what I did. And he shows jacks. Are jacks in his range? Yep, jacks are in his range. And, I got lucky. I really did get lucky. We go back to the turn and say, let's say if I checked here, so the turn comes out. If I check and then the king comes, do I bet? Do I still bet? Good question. Because by my turn check, I'm suggesting some weakness. Kind of, we can do like a stop, your classic stop and go. Some people would recognize that as being weakness and then trying to bluff. Others, and I think at this limit, this 25 NL, I still think if I check the turn, I don't think I can bet again, because I don't think he's going to be calling with these pocket pairs. I think he's going to look at it and say the king probably hit or the flush hit. We'll just be done with it. So not too bad. Not too bad of hands. I think I could question my C bet, my continuance, my continuation bets on the flop and turn on both hands, and we can assess how we proceed at the river later on. But yeah, pocket jacks was in his range. I think we did a good job. All right, thanks for watching. Let's look for tomorrow for 2 more hands.